Hey, and welcome to this episode of the Whole Health with Rob Carney podcast. I'm your host, Rob Carney. This is a platform to connect with and share the stories of health professionals, entrepreneurial leaders, and people who are making an impact in this world. Today, I'm joined by my buddy, Pat Collins. Pat is a student of life, serving to deepen the alignment of humanity with the rhythms of our Mother Earth. He is a co-founder of Black Sheep Regenerative Resource Management, a company regenerating land in Costa Rica while bringing top-quality tropical herbal medicines to market under the brand of Rewild Organics. In his local community, he's built out half an acre of regenerative hugelkultur garden and assists in the development of food systems throughout New England. His intuitive approach to garden design weaves together nutrition, play, inner work, community, and ecosystem stewardship. If this podcast speaks to you, you're interested in learning more, check out a lot of the stuff he's got going on, which I will put all the links in the description box below. We have a retreat that he is hosting in Costa Rica this March, and you will see his email, phone number, and all that you can see to learn more about Pat. And I'm really excited for you to listen to this episode. We recorded this one in person, so there is a little bit of audio challenges just because the mic is in between us. So bear with us on that. But it is a great episode. We're going to be learning a lot, talking about regenerative agriculture. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you get to see our beautiful faces sitting right next to each other, which is always nice to do an in-person interview while we're sipping some nice tea, enjoying each other's energy, and just having a great time. So looking forward to hearing how you like this episode with my buddy Pat Collins. And before we begin, I want to invite you to like and subscribe to this podcast if you listened to prior episodes and have joined them in the past. And like I said before, if you're watching this on YouTube, that's the place to be. I really want to encourage you, if you want to see us chat in person, tune into YouTube if you're not there already. But either way, sit back, relax, and here is my friend, Pat Collins. So here we are. Mr. Pat Collins is with us. So Pat, welcome, my friend.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate you having me here.
Yeah, man. So just like a little bit of backstory. Pat and I actually went to high school together. Pat was a couple years above me. We played lacrosse together. So we kind of knew each other a little bit. But a few years ago, someone had reached out to me and was like, "Oh, you're into health, you're into gardening. Do you know this guy, Pat Collins? You should check him out." And so then I reached out to him and I found out Pat was building his own little homestead in the town that we both grew up in. And we've been chatting ever since. And that was probably 3 years ago or so? I think we chatted on and off the past 3 years.
Yeah, about 3 years. I think we started chatting and it took us maybe 8 months before we actually met up in person.
Right. It's funny how that digital world we're living in. Sometimes it takes us a while to get in person, even though we're only 20 minutes away. So, but Pat's here in the flesh. And Pat, I just want to kind of start off with sharing with people, how did you get into the world of regenerative ag? Because I feel like for me, when we knew each other in high school, I saw you as, oh, this dude's really good at soccer. He's really good at lacrosse. He was really good at sports. And I heard years later you're into regenerative agriculture and all these other things. I was like, wow, I want to know what made that shift happen. So let's have you dive into that story.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I guess I really opened up to the concept of becoming what I would identify as a revolutionary in terms of wanting to revolutionize culture. And that was something that my brain really opened up with psilocybin when I was in my early 20s. And as I started seeing that, I wanted to know what are the pressure points that we could place to shift the culture that we're in, to be living in this world and really creating the world that we fully want to be a part of and the culture that we want to be a part of. So fast forward a few more years, and a friend of mine went down to Verde Energia and took a permaculture design class.
And where is that? Just for people listening.
That is in Costa Rica. Yeah, so that's a community eco village in Costa Rica, one that I'm working with today. And what happened was she came back and said, "Pat, I found the most amazing spot. You're going to love it." I said, "Okay, let's go check it out." I was working part-time. I'm actually an accountant as well. So I was doing people's taxes and she said, "Let's go to Costa Rica." And I said, "Let's go." And so made it down there and thought I'd be there a month. Stayed there about 8 months. Fell in love with the land, fell in love with the people. And the concept of permaculture was introduced to me. And after a couple of years of being there on and off, I was asked to help in creating and developing this company, Black Sheep, which was the overarching company that surrounded Faraday Energia. And that's Black Sheep does regenerative agriculture on a larger scale. So I took that larger scale and I went home to my hometown, and I wanted to do it on a small scale as well, both the macro and the micro. Start to introduce that to the place where I was raised, so that those around me, my nieces and nephews, could be surrounded by some of this culture, and it could help break out of the bubble of suburban lifestyle that I grew up in, that served me very well, but that I would have appreciated having a more robust and zoomed out perspective available to me.
So how would you define regenerative agriculture? Because I think that's something that is kind of like the word organic. I feel like it's kind of lost its meaning to what it actually means. That people throw around the word organic, they throw around the word regenerative, but what does that really mean to you? Like, what does regenerative agriculture mean to Mr. Pat Holmes?
So, regenerative ag. We have a lot of places on the planet where we have had degradation, and to work with regenerative ag is to replenish that into a system that is more in natural alignment with the planet again. So regenerative ag can look a lot of different ways. It could be a lot of what we do in Costa Rica is there's monocropped grassland that was at one point in time jungle. And we will take that grassland and start building soil. And we build soil and we plant trees, and we build it to allow more of the natural wildlife come back into play, more the birds, and it really multiplies on itself. So as you get the birds coming in, they start eating the nut trees, the fruit trees, and they start spreading and dropping. So really it builds on itself. But to come back to regenerative ag, it really is rebuilding ecosystems and building them in a way that makes sense for the natural world, and we can design them in ways that also make sense to align our human culture with the natural world once again.
Love that. And I think what's really important to note, like what you're saying, is that with the monoculture, for anybody that's not familiar, that's basically when somebody grows one single crop in a plot of land. Because in nature, there's not really such thing as one single crop on a plot of land. There's a huge diversity of different organisms, different plants going on. And so part of my perspective of regenerative ag is, like you said, how can we rebuild this ecosystem to get back to what it once was? To actually have this diversity of life that's not a monoculture. It's way beyond that. It's beyond whatever we can even physically as humans imagine is going on in there. The millions or billions of microbes in the soil, the dozens of different birds, the dozens of different rodents, like all the different living creatures that then come back. And there's a really good documentary, I think it's on Netflix, called The Biggest Little Farm. Have you ever seen that?
Yeah.
That one's really good. Watch it like 3 times. Like every time I get pumped up and get emotional. It's like, but basically, the biggest thing on that documentary that really stuck out to me is this was considered an abandoned piece of land. There was no hope for it. It had been commercially farmed. I think it was like an almond farm. I don't remember. Was it an almond farm?
I'm not sure what it started as.
But anyway, it was a farm that was completely used with chemical pesticides, monoculture, and just not taken care of in a holistic fashion. And then after a few years, there were species that hadn't been seen there in decades were coming back because they were storing these systems, starting with the soil up. Remember, the big thing they talked about was they got the vermicompost going, they got the worm farm going, and that was the start. Like you're saying with the soil is really the foundation of everything. And that's where I think that it's so important to recognize that we can talk about growing organic all day. And yeah, maybe you're using organic seeds and you're not using chemical fertilizer, but what's the soil that it's grown in? Mm-hmm. And in regenerative agriculture versus organic is a whole nother leap and bound ahead. So for you at your own home, because I've been there now probably maybe 4 or so times, and every time I'm blown away by the growth that's happened in such a short amount of time. So I'd love to kind of you walk through, how did you transform a suburban home into what's becoming a food forest?
Mm-hmm. So I want to touch base upon the biggest little farm piece. I think they say 7 years is the
Right.
magic number that they at least use in that film to say, you might come across all these issues as you go through your regenerative process, because it takes a whole system to come back into balance, and that doesn't happen overnight. Um, so these issues can arise as you're starting off the project. And I think they had, all of a sudden there was snails all over the trees.
Right.
And so one species at a time, as they come back, might have a negative effect in the short term, but it is all part of the ecosystem, and we need to allow it the space to come back into full being, and to not label it as something that's an issue, but maybe start to see some issues as potential solutions if they can be viewed in a particular way, and that we can work with them. And so I think that's a huge piece of it, and that's a part of my journey in my spot in Massachusetts. It was a barren lot, about a half acre or so, as of 2018, and it had a little bit of gravel on top, and then about 3-4 feet of sand. I'm still trying to figure out what it was before I asked. But completely barren. Couple small white pines starting to pop up and through, not more than a couple feet tall, not doing too great. And so really wanted to build soil there. Like you said, starting to build soil at the very start. And it's amazing how much nature wants to work with us as soon as we start the process. Nature really wants to work. And, I was walking through the woods on the property on another part and started seeing all these fallen trees. And it ran in my family to do burn piles. Burn piles is a really common thing that comes up, especially I think in suburban culture, wanting to keep everything clean. And I was seeing this and saying, wow, these trees have spent sometimes, 80, 100 years sequestering all the carbon. And we're just going to burn it because it's ugly, or we don't want it there, instead of allowing it to break down into soil. I love fires. I think if we use it in a way to heat our homes,
really are great.
We can use it to heat our homes. We can have a ceremonial space with it. But if you're just gonna make a fire and put it on the side, it didn't seem like a great use of energy to me. I thought, okay, how can we take these logs and turn it into soil? And that really got me onto my project, in which case I fell in love with hugelkultures, which is a way of building garden beds and building soil. And I turned.
Is that a German?
Yeah. I think if you pronounce it with the German accent, it's a hugelkultur.
Yeah, hugelkultur. Yeah.
It's just a vertical lasagna layer garden that uses a lot of logs. So started digging holes, burying logs in. I've just been blown away over the past few years how fast soil has been created in this barren space. 2 years in, I started weeding, and I reached my hand down to what started off with just 2-3 inches of topsoil and manure, and elbow deep, even into my shoulder, I could reach all the way into the hugelkultur, and it was pristine soil that had come into play. So that was I really like to think that soil is at the very base of a lot of this. If you think about it, it blew my mind when I learned what seemed like the most basic thing, but it never actually sunk in for me. The nutrients in our food come from the soil that it's grown in.
Right.
And it's like, wow, like that concept is so basic, but so important. We've lost touch with that.
Right.
So really, if you got good soil, you can grow nutritious food. And I think that's the first place we need to look when we're regenerating land, is let's make sure that there's healthy things for our plants to grow in. Not only for the food that we're eating, but for a forest to come back and to flourish in.
Right. And I think that, it's important for people to recognize as well is like with modern science, we say lettuce has this amount of nutrients, this amount of vitamin A, this amount of vitamin C, this amount of fiber, whatever. That is a completely generalized perspective. To say that this had lettuce grown in organic soil in Oregon versus this non-organic soil grown or non-organic lettuce grown in Kansas, those are two completely different vegetables. There's a lot of differences going on. What's the pollution like in the air? What's the soil quality? What quality water is it getting? What's the seed quality? What time of year was it harvested? When was it planted? So many that we can go down every single variable, which there's infinite. They're not the same. And so something I like to ask people is like, what did the food that you eat, what did the food that you ate, what did that eat? So what did your food eat? Yeah, you're eating the lettuce, but what did the lettuce eat? That's the real question, because not all lettuce is the same. So what did your food eat?
Yeah.
And that's, even with animals, we talk about grass-fed versus, grain-fed.
Mm-hmm.
To me, in a natural system, these animals would be eating grass. Typically, grass-fed meats have a higher nutrient profile than grain-fed meats. But also, what did the grass eat? Or what did the grain eat? We can keep going down these rabbit holes of how keep going back the layers. But my point is, I'm just emphasizing the importance of soil that is so easy to overlook when you get caught up, like you're saying, in this singular focus. I think it's easy in this Western society to get caught up in breaking everything into individual pieces instead of looking at it as an entire system. And that's really, the term holistic, the whole picture, how all of this works together. So I also look at regenerative agriculture like holistic agriculture, that we're working everything together to create a holistic ecosystem that is inherently benefiting each other. Like you're saying with the snail example, I think at first the snails were killing all the trees. I don't know if they're fruit trees or whatever. Then what did that do? That brought in birds, and birds started eating the snails, or something was eating the snails, whatever it was. And then they're leaving poop, which is manure for the soil. And
I think they brought in their chickens and ducks.
That's what, yes, they brought in ducks. Yes.
Were you still going? I don't want to cut you
No,
off there.
no.
So, you're bringing up these grass-fed meat and the way that these regenerative systems come about. So, again, grass-fed meat. We might have organic grass-fed beef, and the difference between organic and regenerative. So, now how do we look at that in a regenerative system? And when you have that regenerative system, we're designing the gardens and the grasses that are grown in order for that cow to grow up and be really healthy. And then the cow is going to be having its droppings, and those droppings come in, and then that's going to provide more food for maybe the fruit trees that you may have in the pasture. And so regenerative ag can look all these different ways. And one of the major pieces that you can look at for it is including livestock, including animals as a part of it. It's not a part of every regenerative agriculture plan, but it's a part of a lot of them. And that's something to look at, is no two regenerative plans need to look exactly the same. It's where permaculture comes in with it in terms of observation. We're observing the natural landscape of where we're at, what is naturally there, and then we're working with the culture of nature that's already there,
right,
to really build out that system. So in the ocean, you can have regenerative ocean agriculture where we're growing kelp and oysters and these other aspects. You're not going to have a cow in the ocean,
right?
Right. But in Kansas, if you're doing this, you're probably going to have some cows on the land,
right? And even to that point, like you're saying about the permaculture, you talk about culture. There's so many different methods for farming that what I love is that you can integrate a lot of these together. You can use culture and you can use like Korean natural farming, which for them it's a lot of using mycelium for mushrooms. You get a whole nother layer of talking about how things all work together. So it's like we can incorporate a lot of these different pieces together, and that's what really is always amazing to me. I remember one of my college courses, I took a permaculture course, and the biggest takeaway that I had that was just like this moment was, if you put fruit trees with chickens at the base of the fruit trees, they have to be big enough that the chickens are going to stomp on them. But then the fruit trees drop fruit, the chickens eat the fruit, the chickens poop, they fertilize the soil. The chickens have food, the tree has food. And I remember it's, again, such a simple concept. I remember the first time I heard that, I was like, why does not everybody do this? This is so simple and so easy. Instead of scooping out the poop to put it over here, what if we work things together?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think is really cool about, the setup that you have going, is that it's self-sustaining in a way that you have a diverse amount of plants. And just to give people perspective of, what Pat's place looks like, which I can't even begin to describe in its immense detail. But he has logs, which are, basically if you think of a raised bed, these are actual logs that are keeping the structure of the plant containers in place. But because he's dug a hole in the ground, these things are sinking because the things are decomposing, they're breaking down, it's creating deep, healthy soil. But within these containers, and these are also in beautiful shapes, you get some sacred geometry going on there, there's a diverse amount of plants going on. It's not like this is the tomato row and this is the cucumber row. The tomatoes are growing, the cucumbers and the flowers and the spinach, and everything is interwoven together, just like nature would have had it, because there's nutrient exchange going on between these different plants. And to go back to mycelium, you also have a lot of mushrooms going off those logs too, which are containing the bed in there. So it's really this beautiful tapestry of what's going on. And I think to the average person, they may look at that and say, that's messy, that's not organized, that's not well kept, that's just they kind of threw a bunch of stuff together. But then when you look at it with a fine scope, it's like, this is actually just a really intense tapestry that's interwoven beautifully. So when you're planting things together, how do you decide? Let's say somebody is thinking about putting a garden together and they know, hey, it'd be better if I had things interwoven. How do you decide where plants go, which plants go together? Is that an intuitive process? Is that a scientific process? A little bit of both? How do you decide where things are going?
Mm-hmm. So first things first, always more mycelium, always more mushrooms.
Yes.
When in doubt, add more mushrooms and mycelium to your soil.
Yes.
That's going to expand the basis of how close your companion planting needs to be, because the mycelium will transfer nutrients between plants. In terms of the companion planting, it's a personal process. There's so much information out there. If you type in companion planting online, it's going to stay on Google. I like to say on DuckDuckGo now.
Yeah.
You'll get a one-pager that's a pretty easy layout of these plants go with this and don't plant it here. Plant tomatoes and basil together, but maybe don't plant them next to onions. And so you can follow that and you can kind of make your own map in that way. And also, I enjoy an intuitive process in the garden. I really appreciate gardening as a way to connect with myself, be in a really meditative space and connect with the plants through that meditative space, and then connect with friends that come through in that space as well, and celebrate and have fun in the space and allow that energy that we get to create in that space to all feed each other the same way that the nutrients that we're building feeds each other. So does the energy. So play some good music. Everyone knows plants like good music, but they also really like good music and good dancing. So if you can dance while they're listening to the music with you and develop that relationship, that's a big piece. So as I get into that state, I find that intuition can really take over. So I like to have my plants and my seeds, and as I enter into what I would consider kind of a trance state with some of that dancing and in that meditation, I'll pick up a plant, I'll pick up some seeds, and I'll just breathe with it and listen. And I find that it often my steps just naturally bring me to the place. And it's been a long journey of trusting in that process and doing it. And there's all these mental games that we can go through in terms of, that's not what the companion planting chart said. And sometimes, I've listened to it and sometimes I haven't. But it's all good. It's a fun process to go through. And I really encourage anyone who desires to dive into that intuitive way of gardening to enjoy themselves. And if that's not for you, no issue at all. There's lots of information out there. The term is companion planting. You can find it online.
100%. Two things I want to reflect on that is, you may be hearing this and saying, Plants don't give a shit about music. They don't give a shit about dancing. This is one of my favorite books. It's not related to plants, but if you're watching this, you can see the cover here. The Hidden Messages in Water by Masaru Emoto. And essentially what he does in this book is he plays different types of music to water. And he watches the crystal structure shift in water depending on the music it is being exposed to. Because living creatures respond to their environment. That's how they've adapted to come this far and survive on this planet. They adapt to whatever they're exposed to. So you can see when, like Beethoven, classical, nice orchestrated music is played with the water, they form perfect crystals. When it's heavy metal, swear words, deep bass, just kind of not natural sounds as much, they're imperfect crystals. They look a little congested. So the same thing is with plants at a cellular level. You can even argue that plants are made of water, so it's happening with the water in the plants as well. You're more rabbit holes we can go down here. But point being is that living creatures are responding to their environment. So if you don't want to go and play great music and dance to your plants, at least express some gratitude to them. Showing love and gratitude makes the most perfect crystals in water. The words "I love you," "thank you," create the most in any language. Doesn't matter what language it is. Always making the perfect crystals in water. So with that, if we're going out there and just being grateful for the fact that we have this food growing, that is going to inherently increase the health and vitality of that plant. Whether you believe that or not, intentions matter. And I'll give the example of, you don't think that energy matters. If you were sitting in a classroom in high school and you see some kid come in with like the storm cloud over his head, the whole energy of the entire classroom changes. Let's say it's the biggest kid, he comes in all pissed off. Everyone's like, oh shit, what's going on here? Energy changes. And he didn't say anything, but his energy emanated throughout the room and it was powerful, so it took over. So with that same concept, if we're going around to our plants and bring positive energy, whether that's music, words, dancing, whatever it is, it's the positive energy, really, if we want to simplify it to one thing. Bringing positive energy, just like we bring positive energy to people, it's going to change our relationship with them. And you're mentioning about going out there and intuitively connecting with plants. I was talking with my buddy Dave Robinson on the podcast that dropped last week. And we were talking about how sometimes we just go out there and we just stand there, just like in the garden, just like kind of stand there. And he was mentioning the neighborhood kid who like rides his bike and he like says hello, and then he drives back 45 minutes later. The kid's like 10 years old. It's like, what are you doing? You still like you haven't moved in 45 minutes. And he's like, he said he's like snapped out. It's like, yeah. It's like, why are you doing anything? It's like, well, I am doing something. But he's trying to explain to the hey, like I am doing something, but I'm not. Like I'm just kind of existing with my plants. And sometimes I find myself, my girlfriend, she'll be like inside and I'll be like, oh, I'm just going to go in the garden for like 10 minutes. I come back like 45 minutes, an hour later. It's like, what are you doing? I was like, I don't really know. Like just kind of like getting, like you said, that trance, like kind of getting lost in the garden, just like observing and you're interacting with it and noticing, oh man, that leaf's looking a little droopy. Maybe I'm not giving that enough water. Oh, maybe that position that's not getting enough sun, and just learning the language of the plant and really creating this relationship that it's like, oh, I see what you need right now. That symptom when the leaf droops, maybe it needs some water. And just learning that language, and a lot of that just takes time spent with the plants. And you mentioned in the beginning, is in the movie it took 7 years in the biggest salt farm for things, and that's kind of the number they use. And I always tell people the first year is always the worst yield. It's always the most difficult, often the most frustrating, and that's okay. People often come to me and say, hey, I don't have a green thumb. I can't grow food. Every time I plant something, it dies. Well, yeah, I mean, if I picked up a guitar right now, I'm not going to pretend like I can play the guitar. I don't know how to play guitar. It's a skill. It's something that takes time to develop. So if you have your first year in gardening, it isn't the best yield. Okay, I bet you learned a whole heck of a lot, and I bet next year it's definitely going to be better. And the year after that's going to be better after that, and after that, it just keeps getting better. So, I think it's really important to recognize this takes patience. And like we're saying earlier, like there's a lot of personal development that comes from the world of gardening and interacting with nature.
100%. And something you're talking about there, just being with the plants. And we're talking about the similarities between relationship with people and relationships with plants. And reminds me of in yoga, it's accepted that you sit and you meditate with a master or a teacher, and that place of sadhana, that place of just being in the presence, in the fields, in the energy fields of someone who has really taken the time to develop a lot of wisdom. That there is a certain absorption and a certain learning in that silent space that comes into play. And that reminds me of herbalism and about how we interact with plants. I mean, the plants are deep, deep wisdom keepers. And these individual plants, these different species of plants, each have a different touch of wisdom, the same way that every human that we interact with has a specific piece of wisdom. So by sitting with them, by meditating with them, those energetic fields are interacting with each other, and we start to learn the teachings of mugwort. We learn the teachings of Tulsi. We learn the teachings of sage. I think a lot of us, I like to think of humans, of people, as really of plants as well, as having superpowers. We each have our individuality has a certain superpower to it. And my partner Melody, I think one of her superpowers is the amplification of plant energy. She's an herbalist and a doula. And so it's really incredible to be introduced to plants with her. She'll lead plant meditations, and her presence, she doesn't even realize she's doing it. But what I've felt it to, at least, is I feel that she amplifies the presence of a plant. So if I sit and I meditate with Tulsi, I might grasp a little bit, but she's developed such a relationship there that she sits there and she's then an amplifier of that. And it's really, really a beautiful place to witness. And I remember the first plant I ever had that relationship with ended up being yarrow. And when I truly met yarrow, I lost it in full deep belly laughter for at least 5 minutes. I was so my friends like, here's yarrow. Oh, cool, yarrow. Like looking at it, and she's like, no, here's yarrow. And as I felt the true energy of the yarrow come in with me, it was like a long lost friend. It was just wow. Like that's the mind opening space, the heart opening space of this is what reality really has for us here.
Yeah, I think, this is reminding me of when I took a couple herbalism courses in college, and one of so at the end of herbalism 2, you had to do level 1, then you could do level 2, and at the end of level 2, I remember one of the things was basically our instructor took a bunch of different herbs, different plants, put them around the room and said, choose one you don't know what it is, sit with it, I'm going to drum. Whereas I don't know how long it was, 15, 20, 30 minutes, 40, could have been an hour. I don't know. This was a while ago. But the point was that we sat there with the plant and he's drumming. You're getting into this meditative state and you're just listening. What comes up? I remember at first, I'm like, what am I doing? I'm just like the mental chat of like, what? I'm just sitting with a plant. Like, what am I supposed to, like, what am I going to get? It's just like the Western mind of like, this isn't real. This is some hippie shit. Like, this is like all these stories. Yeah, just like throwing, like, stop doing this. This is weird. It's not like just like just throwing shade at me, just poking me. Like, stop. So and that's a whole other discomfort. It's just the discomfort. This is new. This is foreign. Never done this before. Stop. Get back to comfort zone. But I remember sitting there. I wish I could remember what the plant was. But I remember getting these images, and I was like running through a field. And I remember like by the end, he was like, because you go to everyone individually, so you couldn't be influenced by other people's things. Like, what do you think this plant is good for? I was like, oh, I think maybe like lung capacity, endurance, like these something. And he was like, bingo, this is what it is. And I remember being like, is that just lucky here? And then we did it again, and it was just like, and then we did it again, and it was just like this holy crap moment. Like, I sat with this plant. I found stillness and I listened, and through images in my head, some people would say they'd hear like, oh, it's good for this, like whatever, like however their brain works. But for me, I saw like images running through this field, lung capacity, endurance. And then every time it was spot on. But if I tried to just think, from my logical brain, like try to guess by looking at it, I'd usually be wrong. But when I actually sat with it and basically communicated with this plant, in a non-verbal way, because we're the only creature that uses language.
Mm.
Other creatures communicate in other ways. Same thing with dogs. A lot of that is energetic. They say dogs tend to go to people who have good energy. Like, it's funny, a lot of times I'm walking through the neighborhood here, I'm going for a walk, and dogs start like lunging at me and just like be like, oh, he doesn't usually do this. I'm like, nice. Cool.
Check for me.
Yep.
My energy's
Yep.
good today.
Nice. But there's other days when I'm in a bad mood, the dogs don't come near me. It's very apparent to me how that works. So it's funny how all these things come together. It's cool.
And you're talking about your relationship in terms of communication with plants there, and it, in terms of superpowers, you were sharing, and it was apparent to me that you have visualization.
Mm.
For you, things come very visual,
Mm.
and that's how your communication method tends to work.
Mm.
For me, I tend to feel things. It's a feeling in my body. So connecting with a similar plant, I don't know what plant you were talking about for endurance, but I'm thinking maybe mullein.
Mm.
Mullin's a really good one for the lungs. But if that was me, I might feel it as, oh wow, my lungs feel like they've opened up in this moment, and then that's the communication how it comes through. For someone else, like you said, they might hear something. So these are the different ways that our superpowers of intuition is how I like to think about it. Can come through, and they're different from different people. We have the natural ability to do it in certain ways, and then we can exercise them. We can exercise and develop more. And wow, what a fun process.
It is. This one thing reminds me of another. One of the clients I'm working with right now, he was saying, I'm just going to paraphrase it, basically along the lines of, I've been having trouble getting things done, when my wife wants me to. He's like, sometimes I'll be motivated, and then other times I won't be. And I was like, well, what happens when you're motivated? Oh, I get it done really quick.
Mm.
So the superpower is when you're motivated, you get it done really quick. So act on it when you're motivated. And then that's a superpower. Because now if you're doing it from a place of unmotivation, maybe it took an hour. When you're motivated, you get it done in 20 minutes. And so it's like you're saying with these superpowers, that's the term that we were using. I was like, bro, that's actually a superpower. That's not a bad thing. It's actually a superpower. You just got to harness that in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
We all have superpowers within us. It just, can we get ourselves to a place to be still enough and to listen and allow that superpower to embody itself rather than labeling it with our words, our own thoughts, labeling it as a bad thing by looking at the other side of the coin. Oh, I don't do very well when I'm not motivated. Okay, so act when you're motivated. It's funny how these things work, but it's a fun process to learn about ourselves as we go.
Mm-hmm. And within that space, I think there's a piece of our culture ingrained with us, especially in America, that says you have to be doing in order to be successful, in order to bring something of worth and value. So, like you said, that superpower. Okay, knowing when to do and when not to do, and what not do, in quotes. That state of being can amplify what we can get done when we are then doing. Which I know so much of what you already speak about on these podcasts.
Which and that's that a lot of that comes from the mental patterns we run and the thoughts that we think and the word choices we use. And that's something I've really been increasingly mindful of when I'm speaking. I share this on the past couple of podcasts. Is I'm working actively to eliminate the word busy from my vocabulary. When people ask, how are things going? Instead of saying busy, that to me has a negative connotation that it's like, I don't like what I'm doing, or I have to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Everything I'm doing is a choice made by my other choices, but from those choices. so it's like productive. Things are going well. Things are productive.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing the things I want to do. I have a full calendar of things that I love. That's a way better way to phrase it than say I'm busy.
Yeah.
My calendar's full of things I love. That's pretty cool. That's way better than being busy.
Yeah, very full.
Yeah, like
it's like having a full belly after a meal. Like, can you eat any more food? No, I'm so full and satisfied.
That's even better. I like that. So it's and the point is like this is all within us. And the best part about that is that we have all the power to change it. We're 100% responsible for this. Yes, things that have, maybe our parents or teachers taught us things that we accepted, but we now have the responsibility and the power to change that. Which, talk about a superpower, being able to change your whole world. That's a pretty big superpower that we all have. And so, from that point, just kind of bring this back to the gardening side. A lot of people have this desire to make a change, whether it's for their health, whether it's for the planet, whether it's to show their family a better way. What would you say are some practical steps to get started? Let's just say somebody has a small patch of grass or a small patch of land that they can work with. And small patch could be 1/10 of an acre, could be an acre. Where do you recommend people start?
Well, I would think, what do you really love to eat combined with what grows in your area?
Mm,
That's a good place to look at.
mm.
Do you like salads? Are you more of a broccoli person? Do you love tomatoes? Do you love caprese? Maybe you can't source the mozzarella on your own, but maybe you can get the tomatoes and basil, no problem. So we can start at any scale, and I don't think it can really feel overwhelming when we look at the whole picture of regenerative agriculture sometimes. Like, well, how will I ever learn all of this? Right? Learning's infinite. But what's a little piece that finds interest for you? If you're listening to this and all of a sudden you're thinking, wow, I want to try something like that. I'm really interested. Okay, what piece of it was really interesting to you? What is it that your heart's telling you that finds the most interest? Is it having nutritious food? Is it that relationship with the plants? And listen there. If that's your style, if you're like to go with that intuitive style, if on a more step-by-step place, you want a piece of land that has some sunlight, and you want some water, and you want some pretty good soil. So you can either bring soil in if you want to get started that way, or if you want to start building your own soil, you could build a hugelculture. You can test the soil that you have. UMass Amherst has a really great soil testing lab. It's really easy. Maybe $20 for a soil sample. You
They do a lot.
do it online.
They give a lot of information.
Yeah, they'll tell you if it has the right nutrient complexes. They'll give you if it has any heavy metals in lead. Just certain things to watch out for, and that will give you a base of, is the soil that I already have here going to be workable, or do I need to bring soil in from outside or build soil? If you need to bring soil in or build soil and you just have a small space, go ahead and just purchase a little bit of soil, some good organic soil. And at the simplest way, you can go to your local store and get seed starts. You can already have plants that already started growing. So you can buy the soil, put it down on the ground to a sunny location, buy the plants, pop them in, water them here and there, start sitting with them, being with them, listening. And at its very base, you've done it. You've taken the first step, and from there, listening to what's bringing you enjoyment within that, and following that enjoyment, and letting the spark ignite within you. Because I've just witnessed the gardening spark ignite in so many people's hearts, and it's less of an issue. Once it's there, you can't stop. You can't stop it. It's like
So proceed with caution.
I often joke with my friends. It's like I don't have anywhere to plant this plant, but I need this plant. Right. I need this relationship with this plant. What are we gonna do here? Yeah. And it's hard to stop behind seeds or stop behind seedlings at a certain point, because it's just so exciting to be making new friends on a regular basis. Yep. You're building your own little community in your backyard.
Oh yeah.
But sunlight, soil, some plants. If you want to start from seed, amazing. You can start them inside, or you can start them right outside. Certain plants are better for that. One little tip that I find fascinating about the knowledge inherent within plants is, you have a seed. You put that seed in your mouth, and you let your own genetics touch that seed, there's an intelligence that when you then take that out and you plant it, that plant will grow with the nutrients more likely that your body will need than if you do it otherwise. It generally has more of a general upbringing of nutrients versus being custom made for you, because nature's magic and it's incredible and it just has such a wealth of knowledge that blows my mind on a daily basis.
It's funny you say that because one of my buddies, Ryan Sprague, he was just on Paul Check's podcast recently talking about he grows cannabis, very high quality cannabis. And he was mentioning that for the cannabis he grows for himself, he will do just that, put the seeds in his mouth and then plant them, which I guess I just never heard of that before. But now it's come up twice in a week. And as soon as I heard it, I was like, that's definitely true. As soon as I just intuitive, like, that's definitely true. And I'm going to start, when I plant my next batch here, I got going on. I'm going to give that a go and see how that goes. And like you said, I mean, even I just think of, with like breast milk with a mother, the nipples have a sensor on there that the saliva interacts with and changes the composition of the breast milk. Nature, like you said, nature is amazing. Nature is really, really magical how all these things work specifically for whatever it's working with. And so, to your point, it's simple. It doesn't mean it's easy, but it's very simple. Mm-hmm. You have some seeds or a plant put in soil, given sunlight and water, and the plant grows. That's a pretty crazy concept.
And one leaf off that spinach that you grow might have the same amount of nutrients as a whole bunch that you get in the store. And so often I think those hunger cravings that we have in aspects are we're wanting nutrients. Our body is craving these nutrients. So how are we going to feed them these nutrients? And overeating can be such a piece. I overeat all the time because I love the taste of food. And that's something I'm working on personally. But in terms of the body truly telling us that we're full, when we're getting these nutrient complexes that our body's really craving, it suppresses that hunger.
Definitely. Well, Pat, I want to dive into what you got going on in Costa Rica, because you got a lot of cool things going on down there. I'd love to have you dive into what that is and, how people can learn about that. Where can they get involved with that? And you got a lot of cool stuff going on down there.
Yeah, thank you. So we have our community, Verde Energia, and that's maybe my favorite spot in the world. It's incredible. I spend 3-4 months there every year. And me and my partner, Melody, we're hosting a retreat down there March 9th to the 15th, 2022. She'll be teaching herbalism. We'll be having adventures in going to a waterfall, of going to the river. If you've ever had never had lemonade that's been made on the spot, you harvest the lemons or the limes, you harvest the sugar cane, and you put it all together and you make lemonade, or you make chocolate from bean to bar. Those are both two processes that we'll be doing, and I really believe everyone needs to experience that in life. It is that magical. So you can find that retreat on her website, Your Sacred Vessel. I think
I'll put all those links
tagged. On another scale, you can also stay at our Airbnb at Verde Energia. We have permaculture design classes there. If you want to learn a little bit more in depth about permaculture, we grow turmeric there. We grow a lot of turmeric, and we make that into other goods. And so you can get our golden milks, our turmeric tinctures, all different products on Rewild Organics is our brand, rewildorganics.org. And if you're interested in being more of a part of the team in terms of joining us and joining some of this revolution in terms of regenerative ag and building out the world building ecosystems in Costa Rica, we have opportunities for affiliates to come on board. We also have opportunities for investment starting at 3,000 and ranging all the way up to a high ceiling of 100,000 or so, in a variety of forms. If people really feel called to this work and want to be working with our team, we want to help to empower people, and we appreciate working together and having the further capital raised in order to expand our work. We're doing 178 acres right now. We've been able to protect a little over 100 acres with that work, and we hope to continue to expand in our valley. In the last 16 years we've been working down there, parrots have come back. We've started to see big jungle cats again.
Wow, cool.
So really, it's amazing to witness what happens with a little bit of effort to rebuild the corridor, and we just want to do everything we can to continue to expand that. The tropics grow everything so quickly, so in terms of a place to really have a high impact, the tropics is a good place to look.
Brother, appreciate it. This has been fun. Appreciate the work you're doing. So
Thank you so much.
thank you for doing it. And for everybody listening, as I said, I will put all the links down here. So definitely follow along with what Pat's got going on. Follow along with what his team's got going on. If you want to get involved, check out the links there. There's a lot of opportunities to get involved. You want to try some of the products, give them a try. You want to go down to the retreat, give it a go. I'm sure you'll learn something. I'm sure you'll have a great time. And every retreat that I've ever been on has been a transformative experience. So I just want to encourage you to continue on your personal journey, and hopefully this has inspired you to maybe start growing something. And I will definitely love to see that. If you start planning something after this podcast, tag us both. I would love to see it on Instagram or wherever else you're sharing it. But appreciate y'all listening to that. So keep it going, keep it growing,
Keep rocking.
keep it rocking. All right, everybody.
Cheers,
Appreciate
y'all.
Cheers.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the podcast with my friend Pat Collins. So I've learned a lot from Pat over the past few years since we've been able to reconnect, and I'd love for you to follow along with all the cool stuff he's got going on. Between the retreats he's got in Costa Rica, the opportunities to work with him, invest with him, and to try the turmeric tinctures that they have. And Pat has been gracious enough to offer us 10% off using the discount code wholehealth. So you can save 10% off your order by using the discount code wholehealth, and I'll put the links in the description box here. Or you can go to rewildorganics.com and again use the discount code wholehealth to save yourself 10% off on your order. And I'm looking forward to hearing how you enjoyed them. Turmeric is great for inflammation. It's something I like to use for muscle recovery. It's nice to do before bed, help the body get into that parasympathetic state. Anytime we're getting that inflammation down the body, it's going to help inherently with immune support as well. So check it out, rewildorganics.com, or .org, I should say, rewildorganics.org. Now I said it twice, so now you got to remember that. You go use the discount code wholehealth. And I want to thank you again for your continued support on this podcast. It really means a lot to me that we can grow and flow on this together. And if you are not subscribed on YouTube already, I would really love for you to go check that out. The content that I put out in long form will be dropping there first for the podcast and only there for YouTube videos. Any of my longer form videos will no longer be going on Instagram. I will be transitioning all my long form content to YouTube, so you can check all that out there. Whole Health Connections. You see mine, a little name. I'll say Rob-Whole Health Connections. See the nice logo. And I would love for you to subscribe, watch some videos, and give me some feedback. I'm always looking to adjust and give out the best content that I can so that we can all make this world a healthier, happier, more sustainable place to live. Until next time, I appreciate you. Have the best day ever, and I'll see you soon.